We are going to talk about loops. Now, you've learned about arrays already, but you haven't learned about loops. And arrays and loops actually go hand in hand. You can't really work with one without the other. Now, you can, of course, but in most cases, you have an array because you need to loop through it and show some type of data. If you've ever had an iPhone app, okay, or a web app, and there's a list of items, one after the other, like a to-do list or anything like that, at some point in time, there's some type of list that has to be iterated through in order to display all those things. Okay, and so that's where loops come in handy. So I'm going to go over here to our code. I'm going to comment out stuff that we don't need. Wonderful. Okay, so arrays or loops. Loops. Okay, so what is a loop? How does it work? Well, let's just go ahead and get started with one. This is called a for loop. Excuse me. This is called a for loop. For var x equals 0, while x is less than some value x plus plus. This is typically what you do in a for loop. Some val could be some type of number. For instance, we could say var some val equals 10. Okay, and then what's going to happen here is we're going to iterate until told not to. Okay, this probably doesn't make any sense because it looks funky, but I'm going to walk you through each step of this here. So the first thing you do inside of a for loop is you use the for keyword. That is a reserved keyword, okay? And then you have parentheses, opening and closing. In the first set of parentheses, this is where you can define things. Okay, we're creating a variable called x. Okay, semicolon to separate onto the next statement. This is the condition portion of it. Okay, so only run through this loop if this condition is true, while x is less than some value. If this is true, then we go to the final statement, which occurs at the end of the loop. And in this case, we are just increasing x plus 1. Okay, so let's say some val is equal to 10. That's fine. In fact, I'm going to call this index. That's more appropriate, probably. Oh, actually, total is actually more appropriate. Okay, total equals 10. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, for as many elements as there are, which is 10, we are going to just print. Okay, we're going to console.log x. Okay, so I'm going to explain this to you before we run it here. So total equals 10. So what's going to happen is it's going to go into the for loop. It's going to start the for loop right here. This code is only run once at the beginning of the for loop, okay? Var x equals 0. So we're creating a new variable called x that is only accessible within these curly braces. We could not access it. I could not be like x equals 10 down here. It will not be accessible. That would be out of scope, okay? The scope for this x variable is within these curly braces. And I could have called this anything. I could have called this, bunny smasher, all right? But x is more reasonable. It makes more sense. And we're using it for index. So var x equals 0. So when the for loop first runs, this is 0. While x is less than total, okay? And the reason why we do the less than sign here instead of saying, well, less than, don't we want to say less than or equal to 10? Well, the answer is no, because we're starting off at 0. Because arrays always start at 0, and so we're going to start at 0. We don't want to start at 1. We want to start at 0. So we have 10 elements, yes, but we only want to go through 0 through 9. Oh, okay. So while x is less than total, run this code. So it's going to go through here, and then it's going to go to the final piece here, which is x plus plus. Now, of course, we could have written any statement here. We could have said, x equals 10 or whatever we wanted, but we just want x to increment by 1, which means it's time to go to the next iteration. So the first time it goes through, x is 0. Is 0 less than 10? Yes. So it goes through and it prints, and then it's going to say 0 plus 1. X plus plus is, remember, this is the same as doing x equals x plus 1. Okay, it's easier and quicker to write it that way. So x is now equal to 1. So it goes back over here. Never runs this again, okay? So now 1. Is 1 less than 10? Yes, it is. And then it's going to run through the loop, and then it's going to do this, and up to 2. It's going to go, and it's going to go, and it's going to go until So we're here at 9 now. Let's say we're at 9. Is 9 less than 10? Yes. Okay. Then it's going to run through the loop and x plus plus, and it's going to make this equal to 10 now. Okay, x is now equal to 10 at the end of that iteration. Now, is 10 less than total? No, it's not. 10 is equal to total. So this fails and the loop is done. So let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to go to my index.html file, show in Finder, open with Chrome, and I'll bring it over here. Okay, Command Alt J. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Did it print up 10 times? If you said no, you're wrong because it starts at 0. Okay, so it did print up 10 times. I know it can be confusing, but that's how it works. Starts at 0, and obviously we want to go to 9. There's 10 elements here. Arrays always start at 0, which we haven't created one. We're just messing with numbers right now. So I probably shouldn't have closed that. Let me actually reopen that here. Chrome. There we go. So let's pull this off the side here. Wonderful. Cool stuff. So we have now written our very first for loop. We've iterated through something, but this isn't super useful, right? Like, what? What's going on here? So remember our previous example of students in a class? This would be a really good example, okay? So let's go ahead and comment this out here. Okay. And what we want to do is talk about students again. So var students, it's going to be a list of students. So, you know, John, Jacob, Jingle, Heimer, and Smith. These are the kids in our class today. Some of you are probably saying, hey, that's my name too. Var students, in case that was one of your names. Anyway, students. So what do we want to do? We want to iterate through the students. We just want to print their names, okay? Let's say our teacher is a robot, or it's a digital classroom, and we want to welcome all the students to class this morning. So the bad way to do this, right? Let's do the bad way first. Remember I was teaching about don't repeat yourself, the dry principle. If you're repeating yourself, you're probably doing something wrong. So I could say console.log students 0, you know, console.log students 1, console.log students 2. Okay, let's go ahead and run this, see what happens. Command Alt J, refresh. John, Jacob, Jingle. It worked, right? That's cool, but it's not very efficient. That's not a good use of our time. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to do an exercise. I want you to pause the video, okay? And I want you to figure out how to loop through the students array and print up every name using a for loop. Okay, so pause the video right now. Try building a for loop like we just did and iterate through the students array and print up each student with a console.log. Go ahead and do that now and return and report. Did you do it? Okay, pause it and go do it. I'm going to tell you again. Okay, good? All right. So I'll go ahead and solve this for you now. Hopefully you just had a chance to practice and use your own brain, which is critical to coding. You can't always use Mark Price's brain. Besides, you don't want to know the stuff that goes through my head. So let's create a for loop for var. And just to show you we can be different, for var index equals 0, while index is less than what? What do we want to put here? What do you think we want to put here? Well, we could put the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 elements in that array, so we could put 5. But I think there's a better way. Okay, what we're going to do instead is say students.length. Ooh. And then we'll say index plus plus. Interesting. Okay, so what is this dot length? Well, an array has a property, okay? It has a property called dot length, which will give us the number of elements that are in it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, some of you are probably thinking, wait a minute, I thought arrays, you know, they start at 0, so wouldn't that be 4? Well, no, the indexes may not go to 5. It'd be 0 through 4, but we still need to know the length, how many total elements are in it, because 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is 5 elements. Oh, okay. So let's go ahead and do the assignment here. Console.log, and we're going to say students, and we're going to put index in there. Okay. So down here, we put the actual number, the actual index that we wanted to print, Here, we're using the index of the loop. So we're saying index starts at 0, and the rule is it can't go, while index is less than the length, then we increase the index by 1 every single time, okay? So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 that's great. So 4, it prints it up, and then this goes to 5. Well, 5 is not less than students.length. 5 is equal to that, so it won't print up, which is great. This is exactly what we want. So we're reusing our tools. Now, I know this can be confusing, and it's hard for me to explain this any further, okay? You're going to have to look at this code, read it line by line, and see what's actually happening here. But just know the index is changing every single time because we're adding 1 to it. And the rule helps us stay within the limits of the array because we know that it needs to be less than 5. So let's go ahead and print it now. Or run it, I mean. Now look at that, John, Jacob, Jingleheimer, Smith. Okay, so it actually printed up every single name in the class, and it did it with just 3 lines of code. Okay, that is pretty dang cool. And really, that's how you work with arrays. Okay, you can literally just iterate through an array and print things up using the index here, which I think is pretty awesome. You can also, doesn't have to be index plus plus, you could add, let's say, index plus equals 2. We can just add 2 every single time, see what happens just for fun. Let's run the program. It only printed John, Jingle, and Smith. So if we're adding 2 each time, that means the first time we go around is 0. So we print up John, and then we go to 2, so 0, 1, 2, and Jingle, and then 1, 2 is Smith. So, yep, it just skips around. Okay. You can do lots of cool things with this. It doesn't have to be always x plus plus. However, that's the most common use case here. Also, one thing you need to be careful of, and you will experience this, is index out of range. Okay. Let's say we did less than or equal to. Okay. What problems do you think we might have here? Well, if index, so instead of when we get to 4, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the final index, and now we run this here. Okay, this is now equal to 5. Okay, so is 5 less than or equal to students.length? Well, it is. So if we run this, students 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's nothing over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Undefined. Okay, it's broken. We have broken code, which is not good at all. All right, so one thing that's very important is to make sure your logic is correct. It is very easy to try and access things that are out of the range of your array. Okay, and so it's always important to make sure you've got your proper rules in place here. So we want to get rid of that equal sign. Okay, so those are for loops. Okay, not too bad. It'll take a little bit of getting used to. I know some people do struggle with this quite a bit, and struggle even more to figure out when to use them. So here's the rule I'm going to give you. If you're working with an array, you probably are going to need a loop to go through that array to help you figure out what you're finding, okay? Or to help you get what you need so you can use it. So very, very powerful tool. They go hand in hand. Now there's other types of loops. Okay, we're not going to cover all of them in depth. This is just an intro to loops. Get you ready. This is the most common loop that you'll use. As we learn about objects, I'll show you a little bit more about how to iterate through an object with loops. But this is good for right now. Okay, this is really good stuff. This is foundational. This will help you in all the websites that you're building and all the apps that you're building. You're going to use loops all the time. So that's it for now. Mark Price at devslopes.com.